And next we're going to hear from Maura Dunn from General Dynamics Electric Boat Division. And Maura Dunn was named as Vice President of Human Resources Administration in May of 2014. She's responsible for safety and industrial hygiene, security and administration, labor relations, staffing and site administration, salary administration and employee relations, health, wellness, and disability, and also training. Maura Dunn.
Considerably shorter than anyone else who will ever speak here. I'm just happy these days when I actually can clear the podium. So we have a really exciting story to tell, and I'm happy to be here today to share this with all of you. The first slide, I think, says it all when you really look at it. Oh, by the way, I should preface this by saying, please tell all your friends at Electric Boat, and I know many of you have many friends, this presentation is like the anti-electric boat presentation. It has no bullets and only limited pictures of submarines, because we know y'all know what they look like. But I think the bottom line is it's a very exciting time to be at Electric Boat. I think there were a lot of concerns if you look at the national level back in Washington, D.C., and Congressman Courtney's here and can talk to us about this. There were a lot of concerns. Can Groton, Connecticut really come up with the workforce that Electric Boat needs? And I'm really proud to say, as a lot of hard work and retooling on our own part, much like the town is doing, we ended up getting, believe it or not, 81,000 applications last year. 81,000 applications. And I think what that means is that there's really a lot of buzz here. And of those, we actually converted a large number into actual hires. We hired almost 4,000 people between Connecticut and Rhode Island. And what we're finding is that many of these people are really excited about the work that's here. They need some help trying to find their way into the community, and I'm so excited you've made my mornings talking about all these housing projects, because if you had my job, one of the things that you constantly hear about is housing, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. I think one key point that I try and make to Connecticut leaders all the time is that we're growing, but the entire defense industry is growing in Connecticut, and that's thanks to the hard work of the congressional delegation, who really understands the opportunities that exist when manufacturers have funding and steady funding, which enables them to basically continue to grow. And so if you look at this map, it really shows you there's 3 central hubs in Connecticut from a business perspective. Electric Boat, dominating in the southeastern part of Connecticut, the United Technologies Pratt & Whitney group up near Hartford, and then out towards Sikorsky in western Connecticut. And why is this important? Because we are really trying to draw the hires that we get from Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New England. I actually came here about 4 years ago, almost to the day, from Virginia, and I didn't know how to drive in snow, which may sound shocking to you all, but if you've ever seen pictures of Washington, D.C., paralyzed in a snowstorm, imagine I moved there from Virginia Beach and thought the people in Washington were hardy. So my shock was 84 inches of snow my very first year here. So I kind of said, wait a minute, why are we going to Florida to recruit people? Why don't we stick closer to New England? And that's what we're doing. But the relevancy here is we're trying to make sure we're not bumping into Pratt, particularly when it comes to trade workers, which will really fuel much of our growth in the future. So this is the slide that everybody likes to see. We have to send this constantly to people in Washington, because if you look at it, it really shows the story. But I think more remarkably is that with many of you probably not even really noticing it or being cognizant of it, when I showed up 4 years ago, EB's population was roughly 12,000 people. It's already at 16,500. So if you think about that, in a very short period of time, we've had a remarkable amount of growth. And frankly, that's just the beginning if you look at this chart. We have some near-term challenges as we finish up a number of submarines. If you crossed the Gold Star Bridge and looked at night, there are submarines everywhere at Electric Boat right now. A couple of those will go back to sea, and we're continuing to work for some maintenance work before all the big Columbia-class work comes. And Columbia is really the big game. It will only be delivered in Connecticut. It has, it's much bigger than what we're currently building in the Virginia fast attack submarines, and it's going to require a tremendous amount of people for us to be able to deliver those ships. At the end of the day, though, as you can see, that number of people we need to hire, 15 to 20,000 people, that's a pretty incredible job, but I think we're feeling, as is the Navy, that we can do that out of this area, given all the hard work that we've done to actually improve our recruiting. What we need is to make sure we all work together to have a vibrant community these people can live and work in. One thing to keep in mind, while that slide says 15 to 20,000 people, I want to make sure people understand that we're trying to do two things that I think are pretty hard to do all at the same time. One, we have a large amount of growth to manage. We just talked about that. But second, we have a large number of people who are actually retirement eligible. So 1 in 3 of our workforce is retirement eligible. They spent their careers building submarines, and now they're looking towards a well-earned retirement. The challenge for us, though, is that this slide, and I think it's a perfect example, it's actually inside Electric Boat, 3 random people. We didn't stage this, believe me. But I think part of what you're seeing in this picture is what the future represents for business leaders like yourselves. You see 2 millennial people, or generation X, Y, Z, something. Those folks are really looking to be part of this community. They're drawn here by the work and the opportunity for a long career at Electric Boat, but what they're looking for is slightly different. So people touched on, they want walkable communities, they want housing choices, they want all of that. They want to pretend that they're living in some place very cosmopolitan, but they enjoy the many advantages that our area has to offer, including the beautiful water, the incredible beaches, the opportunities for boating. There's lots of boats and houses being purchased by this crowd. They're also looking to settle and grow families. A little fun fact for all of you that I keep thinking people need to hear this part of our story. We had 280 births last year at Electric Boat. I mean, think about that. And oh, by the way, that number is going up 15 to 20% a year. So as we're talking about consolidating schools, we need to keep in mind that we're literally producing a couple of kindergarten classes for you all every single year. And they'll be here relatively soon because this birth jump really started a few years ago. There's also a group of people that are in the trades, and those folks, I think, seem to be less interested in this downtown, this is what I want. But frankly, that's where our future growth is. Most of these people seem to want more space. I think they may have a few more toys than some of the engineers. And our engineering population is kind of topped out. So what you're really looking at is we've got to go figure out how to make our community attractive to all these folks who are going to work in the trades. And those are very good jobs that take middle-skilled workers and actually provide them with middle-class wages that have long supported the people in this area. And then finally, I would say, as you think about the senior management team at Electric Boat, and we can go down to like management level jobs in that, there are a lot of those people that aren't ready to retire, but are looking to downsize. And what I hear from them is that there's not really a housing product in this area that meets their needs. And I can assure you, looking at how many boats and fancy cars those people have, they have the money to spend. They just need someplace to live that I think offers more amenities than much of what we see in the area. So this is really where the big story is, in the growth in the trades. And I think lots of people have been focused on what we have been growing in, which is in engineering. But really 2 areas that we have to do a lot more growth in. One, the trades, and second, believe it or not, our supply chain. Now, for talking to many of you in the audience, I don't know that you're ready to become a supplier to an electric boat, but what I can tell you is that there's a huge ripple effect in that. And oh, by the way, we actually have to have people to do all the buying. And many of them are coming to the area from area colleges. That's a place where you don't have to be an engineer to be a buyer. We take a lot of people with finance and business backgrounds and turn them into buyers who are capable of buying all the supplies and products that go into our submarines. The key story, though, to me is the trades. And that's where a lot of the focus of my team has been, really trying to understand who do we need, and this gives you a breakdown by trade. This has really helped, the fact that we understand our workforce so at the granular belly button level, as I tell the Navy. It's helped build some confidence that our region can actually deliver the people that we need. And as I said earlier, there was a lot of doubt about that in the very beginning. This seems to be frozen. What? Ooh, that's a little scary if you look at that. The next piece we're really going to talk a little bit about is trying to, and we can do it without slides because all you were going to see were more pictures of people. The big piece that I also wanted to focus a little bit on is training, because that is something we're spending a tremendous amount of time in. If you look at it, as terrific as the schools are in this area, we don't have a ready-made supply of the people that we need, particularly for these trade jobs. So we've spent a lot of energy working with community partners like Three Rivers and Grasso Tech and the state of Connecticut and the Eastern Connecticut Workforce Investment Board. What a treasure we all have in John Beauregard, who's literally... That man has helped us coordinate services across the state of Connecticut, trying to help us attract the workforce that we need. If you talk to a lot of our entry-level workers, you're not finding that they're coming ready-made with the skills that we need. We're basically looking for somebody with a high school education for these trade jobs, maybe some level of college. We're able to provide them with the opportunities to earn a degree if that's what they're interested in, or to advance their career path in the way that's comfortable to them. But I would tell you that we do need some level of basic math and reading skills, and that has been more problematic than it should be, given how much we all collectively spend as taxpayers on schools. But what we've been doing with these partnerships is trying to develop a candidate that is more closely equivalent to the folks that would have come out of a vocational system that was much stronger many years ago. And so we have developed a series of pipelines where we take somebody, we encourage them to go through the John Beauregard Eastern Connecticut Workforce Investment Board to Three Rivers Community College, Grasso Tech, Quinnebog, and we are recently looking to expand our outreach a little bit because most of these people we're recruiting very heavily within 50 miles of Electric Boat. 50 miles is about as far as our outreach really in terms of a workable commute is. So there's opportunities if you're a little further out from Groton for you to understand where that workforce is going to come from. But those folks go to those programs, end up with an actual certificate, and about 90% of the time a job at Electric Boat or one of our suppliers. So the programs are really working, and they're providing a terrific opportunity for people to basically go from a job where they might have been doing pretty well, but more likely they were dealing with seasonal employment or underemployment, and they're ending up positioning themselves extremely well for careers at Electric Boat. And what we're increasingly seeing, given the retirement demographics I spoke of earlier, many of these people are actually retiring, or not retiring, but our new hires are ending up in supervisor or manager jobs very quickly in their careers in a timeline that we wouldn't have seen previously. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you all have about our growth and sort of where we are. I promise we can bring more submarine pictures in the future. Yes?
Can you share with us how big that new building's really going to be?
We are still working on the new building, so let me touch a little bit about that. In order to be able to accommodate the Columbia class, we definitely need more facility space. So as you may have heard, we recently announced we were kind of doubling down in Connecticut and making significant investments. At this point, the building is about 2% designed. So we are in the stages of trying to figure out what's going to happen. What we do know is we're pretty much focused on the south end of the yard. Why is that? Well, because the north end of Electric Boat, if you haven't looked at it in a while, is pretty congested. And moreover, it's where all the central utilities that feed all of Electric Boat's enterprise is located. So that's forced us, with some strong guidance, let's call it, from the Navy to really go down and look at how do we make sure we don't interrupt the production of the Virginia fast attack submarines, which is critical to the country. So we still are working on it. We basically need to construct about 200,000 square feet in order to be able to produce a Columbia. Columbia is 42 feet in diameter, so pretty large submarine. And of course, you also need some height, because if you think about it, I mean, just the strong backs, which is in non-technical terms, the big braces that we actually put a submarine on before we build it are taller than I am. So we need height to be able to do that. So we're still in the early stages, focused on the south yard, and we need about 200,000 square feet. Yeah?
Do you have a sense for the percentage of retirees who want to stay in the community after they retire?
I would tell you that many of them stay in the community, as is evident on a spring day if you've been to the golf course at Shinnecock. I would say, though, that they're here because their kids are here. Many of them are working at Electric Boat, but I won't lie and say that they are enjoying Connecticut winters. Many of them are headed down Florida, South Carolina, but more often than not, I think they're actually staying, which I think is further exacerbating the housing situation. I would tell you that when you look at what we're trying to do, particularly with John Beauregard and his programs to look at trade people, we're trying to get people with basic math skills. And I appreciate, I had more than my fair share of math teachers who maybe didn't reach me. But what I would tell you is I think as a community, we need to understand the importance of the basic STEM skills. I think the other thing that we need to do is encourage people and have more dialogue about the promise of these trades. I would tell you I serve on the Career and Technical Education Board in the state of Rhode Island, because we're a significant employer there too. And I think there are still a lot of parents who are apprehensive about what does it mean to not put my kid on a college track. And if you look at it, just last night I went to our apprenticeship dinner. We have an apprenticeship program, just revitalized both of our apprenticeship programs. Tremendous interest. The parents were actually there to receive scholarships for their kids who were going to go to four-year colleges. And if you look at the challenge of that, I mean, one parent was telling me their kid looked at a school in Boston. The average price tag was $58,000. And oh, by the way, just the food bill, I don't have children, so this blew me away. Just the food part of the tuition package was $8,000. And if you look at that, that's huge. And we're like, please go, everybody wants to go to college. And that's kind of the way the school system is set up. But if you really look at it, you know, we have entry-level kids who within 2 or 3 years are pushing hard on $55,000 a year, and they're debt-free. And that is a really good fit for a lot of people. And if I had a dream, I'd like to be able to see more of us talk about the value of that. Otherwise, I don't know if anybody reads the Wall Street Journal, but last week I read a crazy story about plumbers who are literally getting ping pong tables and yoga classes like they're software engineers working for Google, because there are so few people interested in the trades. And we've got to collectively figure out how to make those jobs valued by our society and for parents to see that as a viable option.
And Maura, along with a real attachment on the way to do this.
Well, thank you for your feedback. I don't want to leave the impression that they're not. In fact, we've actually had some really good conversations that were held with Catherine Smith, with ourselves and Pratt. Sikorsky took the position that we're still trying to wrap our heads around where they are. I think now, with the hindsight of their deal just being announced a couple weeks ago, I have a better sense of why they might have been a little quieter. But I think the great news is that the state, with the efforts of our incredible congressional delegation, is really starting to wrap their head around the fact that, and this is our president, Jeff Geiger, who many of you might know, he lives in Groton. He always jokes that I do HR math. Even though I have an MBA, I still like to kind of round things less precisely than the engineers at Electric Boat. I would tell you that I think we probably need as a state about 100,000 manufacturing workers, which is why, to me, I really appreciate your question about what do we need to do as a school system, because the good news is I think the state's getting it and they're preparing to invest, and they've actually got some pretty exciting plans to be able to divide the Career and Technical Education program into a separate school board from the regular Department of Education. So I think you'll see an increased focus on that, which is really important to the state. Yes? Well, let's talk about that for a second. So if you break down that state economic assistance, let me frame one other thing. So I grew up in Virginia. I grew up really, actually very close in the same media market as our competitor Newport News. And I can tell you for a fact that the Navy cares how much a submarine costs, as can Congressman Courtney. And to be honest with you, the business climate, and I say this not because I grew up in Virginia, is significantly better in Virginia. And so we're already facing a competitor who has a better business climate than we do. And oh, by the way, the state of Virginia, just in my lifetime, without even really thinking, I can tell you about 5 or 6 deals where they pumped in hundreds of millions of dollars to Newport News. And the federal government, the Navy in particular, looks at that and says, wow, how interested in electric boat is Connecticut if we don't see something coming out of them? Because the way the Navy looks at it is, every dollar that doesn't come from them is one more dollar that they can put into building capacity in the submarines. So that's kind of the climate that we look in. In fact, part of the reason why we have a little dip is because despite tremendous efforts by the congressional delegation, a submarine repair job actually went to Newport News and not to Connecticut because we couldn't compete from a price perspective. So I do want to put that in the context of that. I also want to break down the state aid for you for a minute. $8 million of that is actually going to community colleges in Connecticut. It is actually devoted for us to help fund these pipelines, which frankly is getting increasingly harder because a lot of the money that's spent on workforce development is already earmarked for things that are out there. And this sort of sudden need for defense manufacturing workers is not something the system's really set up to work. There's also a bunch of money that's actually going towards dredging, which has many benefits for people in the area, given that we're a waterfront community. So a lot of it is really tax incentives in terms of building it, and frankly, that makes the fact where, if you look at our basic premise, we're going to invest about total of $1.6 billion between Connecticut and Rhode Island. We won't even see the actual construction contract until 2024. And for many of you who are business leaders, think about what kind of deal do you get when you get told, please go invest in a large amount of capital, and then in a few years, we'll provide you with a contract. And that's kind of the bets that we take, being one of only 2 providers for submarines in our country. But generally speaking, this aid actually makes a difference to us in terms of helping make that investment profile easier.
Okay, Maura can take one more question.
Yes?
Related to the housing needs, what do you see in the next 5 or 6 years of the type and size of housing price range that people are looking for?
I would tell you I'll give you an example. The head of compensation for Electric Boat just bought a house. She's actually moving to Pawcatuck from Westerly. She was moving out of a starter house and she wanted a little bit more space, but I would tell you that they're not comfortable with let me go run to the waterfront and buy a $500,000, $3 million house on the waterfront. So they're looking for something that's probably in that $500,000 range. Most of them want a few more bedrooms. They're having all those kids we talked about, and they want a little bit more space. And they generally want, I would say that our workforce is very much products of HGTV, so everybody needs granite and all the rest of the stuff that we all see on Home and Garden TV. And I think that's kind of what they want, a little bit more space. So with that, thank you all very much for all you're doing to help support us.